Hello and welcome to this next video, which I've called the 15-minute painting challenge. In this video I'm going to put to test Sydney Roundwood of Roundwood's World 15-minute painting sessions. Sydney has spoken in the past about basically sitting down and doing 15 minutes worth of work each night just on painting figures, and you see the vast amount of difference and amount of work that you can get done just in that small amount of time. A lot of people talk about how they really don't have time to sit down and paint figures when it comes to wargaming or gaming in general, and you know they look at the whole, whereas this really just concentrates you down, focuses you down onto one particular aspect of that painting process. So what I've done is I've taken a sprue of these plastic Soldier Company late war British, because I'm painting these at the moment anyway, and I've actually turned them into this set of 6 double based figures, and I've done this over a series of 15 minutes sessions. It's taken me about maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 sessions, but I'm going to show you each one of the different ones why I didn't know this anyway in this video. But you could basically do that over a week, and then if you carried on doing that for a month, you would then have, you know, at least a platoon of figures ready to play with in good time, really. And that doesn't include obviously other times that you may get a chance to paint more than 15 minutes at a time. As I say, this is literally 15 minutes, so you could do this at lunchtime, you could do it straight after work, you could do it before work, before you go out, you could do it just before bed, you know. And I've actually timed each one of these sessions, and every one of them was less than 15 minutes. So the first thing to do was to prep the figures. What I did, I took the sprue and I started my clock 15 minutes, you can see there, and I cut the sprues down, just trimmed off all the excess plastic, and there's a couple of the Bren Gunners and the crewmen they need putting together, so basically I took those off. Then as you can see there, I clipped off a lot of the sprue that I didn't need, so I could actually get around the figures easier while they're still on the sprue. Glued the Bren Gun crew together and then sped up the drying time there with a hairdryer. That was one of the caveats. I allowed myself a drying time with the hairdryer as part of this. One of the other things was as well, if I was actually painting something and the timer ended, I would work until I'd finished that colour but not start again. These were just some of the ground rules I set, but I used the hairdryer, and I used it here a lot to dry up the primer spray. This is just a basic spray that I got from Wilko's here in the UK. Use any you want, I don't pay a lot of money for them. And then I went and blocked in the very basic uniform colours of the figures. In this case it was Vallejo's English uniform. While they're still on the sprue, this just speeds up processes later on. I did it now before I put them onto the bases, and then again just dried that off with the hairdryer. Didn't take very long at all. Separating them from the sprue, cleaning up the bases, very simple, very quick, and then I was just going to glue them onto the bases themselves. I usually do my bases first, a lot of people don't, personal preference completely at the end of the day, and I was basing these here with 2 men on each, so I can use them for various different games like Chain of Command. And as you can see there, I had 1 minute 44 to spare, and they were now on the bases and almost prepped at this point. I've obviously sped up this timing here just so you're not sat through, you know, an hour and a half long video. But then I got onto the using the ready mix filler. This is just to build up the size of the base, so then when this is dry, I'll be able to sand it, and it also just gives a bit of texture to those bases as well. You don't have to do much more than this if you don't want to, but I always put a bit of sand on, which is the next stage. But this didn't take very long at all. However, the mixer takes a long time to dry, and I left it for 24 hours just to ensure that it was completely dry. You could again speed this up with the hairdryer, but by the time you've dried these, your 15 minutes will most likely be up anyway. So I just left them overnight, and they were perfectly fine to come back to the next day. You just work through all 6 of the bases. I didn't do the Bren Gunners because there's no point, because you'll see why when I come to do the sanding anyway, because there's just going to be sand on those bases, so I left them flat. But the 5 others, again, as you can see, it took about 7 minutes or so to do all of those. Obviously, if you're doing more figures, it's going to take a lot longer. If you're doing individuals, that will also take a lot longer as well to do. So we moved on the next day to doing the sanding. This was just using PVA glue and sand. I have a very thin sand that I use. I just have a little bucket of it that I dip my figures into once I've painted the PVA on. Obviously the PVA is see-through, so it's just be careful that you've completely covered the entire base of the figures. You can always go back and finish them off if needs be, if you've got gaps in the sand anywhere. But generally I try to get it first time if I can. But obviously this is completely up to your own preference. You can base however you want. This is how I do it. I then dried them off with the air dryer with the hair, and I just basically blew them about all over the place, as you can see. But it certainly sped up the process, and I definitely, I had nearly 10 minutes left at this point, so I thought I may as well push on, just get them dried up, and then I can get the next bit on, which is the base green for the bases themselves. Now I use Vallejo Intermediate Green. It's quite bright, and it looks bright at this point, but we will be dry brushing this in a little while anyway, just to actually calm that colour down a little bit, and then also ink washing it and then dry brushing it. So we're going to be adding a few different colours onto this as well, so don't be too alarmed at how green this is at this point. It'll certainly change, but again, absolutely your own preference. This is quite an old school method of doing things, but it matches my table and my cloths and things I use, so this is how I do it. I also thin down the paint as well, just a little, to let it spread over the rest of the sand. And you can see there 2.5 minutes left to go on there. So then we did move on to the ink washing. Unfortunately I started the camera after I started the ink washing, so I had to restart, but I only lost a couple of seconds here, so I hope you'll allow me that. But basically this was Vallejo's Flat Earth, thinned down with water to a right consistency, and then just slopped liberally all over the base. You can see there it's quite wet, so again still had quite a lot of time left over, so I just got the old airbrush out again, the hair dryer, keep calling it airbrush, the hair dryer, and just went over everything until they were dry, and then used yellow to do some dry brushing over the top of the bumps to bring out that texture on the base. This is just a very cheap yellow that I picked up years ago that I've been using for a long time. Sunny yellow I think it is. Dry brushing is basically you get some paint on the brush, wipe as much off, and then just wipe it all over the thing, and you will see that it covers some of the nodules and just gives you a little bit of a look of yellow. I then just went back and blocked in the English uniform on those figures where there's areas that I'd either dry brushed over them or I'd missed previously. So then they were basically done at that point. There wasn't a great deal left to do in this stage, apart from I figured in 5 minutes I've got enough time just to paint the helmets. Unfortunately I painted them the wrong colour. I painted them in bronze green. They should really be in brown violet. So I went back later on and just repainted them brown violet, but this literally took all of 2 minutes to do. And then that was done. So again, 2 minutes left over just there on off the 15 minutes. And it was on to the next stage. So our next stage was actually starting to paint the details now. So I started with tan yellow, which is what I use for flesh colours, or Caucasian flesh at least. I prefer it to the ones that are called flesh colour. It looks more like white flesh, I think, than the sunny skin tones and things that Vallejo do. So then I just went around the faces, hands and faces of all the figures with a very small brush. Just get every little bit there, cleaned all those up. Didn't take very long at all, about 5 minutes, because there's a bit of detail work. Then I went and did the boots. So this was just working my way through. The thing with these British soldiers is there isn't that many colours on them, so you can speed through them. Obviously, if you're painting something like Napoleonic figures, they've got lots of figures, you'll probably end up spending a lot of time, just 15 minutes painting one paint. But this is just, a demonstration to show you can do quite a few figures at once if needs be. Beige brown was up next. This was for all the wooden pieces, so this is all for the gun handles and the stocks of the rifles and things that the men are carrying. I just went round and did all these. These are all very simple, easy little bits and pieces that can just be knocked off pretty quick. And then finally, the gunmetal grey which I just went over all the metal bits. So this was like the Bren gun, the ends of the Lee Enfields, the straps and bits and pieces that they have on them, some very small details. Again, I didn't go into massive detail because these are for tabletop purposes and not for competition winners. But that was it, 2 minutes 50 left over on that one, and they was finished. Most of the detail was done. I didn't start on the khaki there because I knew it was going to be a big job, so I left that for my next phase, which was the next 15 minutes. So this is starting off with the khaki. So this is all the webbing that they're wearing and their backpacks and puttees as well. So there's quite a lot of this on each of these figures, and you can see it takes quite a bit of time. I didn't actually think I'd have enough time to do this in the 15 minutes, but it turns out I did. I was pretty much on top of it, and again, just using a small brush, working your way around the details, doing all the bits, making sure you're not missing anything. Go back if you do. This is not the khaki that I would normally use. It's slightly brighter than khaki, but because I'm going to ink wash these anyway, I don't mind that, because the ink wash is quite dark and it will darken down the tones on this anyway. So again, like I said, just really a case of just working your way solidly through all these bits. This is the kind of thing you'd be doing if you were doing Napoleonic figures, for instance, where you might just do one red, which would be all the red coats, and then you go back and do all the white straps and things. But if you're only doing just even one colour in one 15-minute session, you're certainly making a massive impact on the figures that you're painting. And don't let it put you off at all. Don't think about the whole of the figures, just think about that particular colour at that particular time. So I dried off the khaki with the hairdryer again, and then went back with my favourite wash, which is Citadel's Agrax Earthshade. If I could buy shares in this stuff, I certainly would. It's really, really good shader. Just get it from Games Workshop, and basically liberally put this stuff all over these figures. Try not to get too much on the base. Don't worry too much if you do, because you can always cover it up later. And then I was literally 15 seconds off 15 minutes in that. So I was almost, I was definitely under time. I was almost over time, but that was it for that particular session. I was quite chuffed with how quick I got it in. So I left the Agrax to dry. Again, maybe overnight. You might not have to if you're using your hairdryer. And I just went back with the Vallejo tan over the flesh areas, because people are drawn to skin and to faces and things. So they're the ones that I highlight. I didn't bother highlighting anything else, because I think the Agrax is good enough as a shader as it is anyway to just to go on the figures as they are. Then I cut the Brengrun crew off their sprues, put them onto their little base. You can see there. I sped that up with some super glue accelerator, and then just dried that off with the hairdryer again. Then I went on to spraying them with the varnish. This is the matte, professional matte varnish, best varnish on the market as far as I'm concerned. And then we were really down into the last stages, and this was just adding PVA glue to the bases, dipping them in static grass. There's tons of this all over the internet. You can buy it anywhere. It's railway modeller's stuff. I don't use it with an applicator because it's short enough and small enough to stand up on its own. And then gave them again another dry with the hairdryer. Just went through them all to ensure that the PVA was dry, because I did the very last thing, which was adding grass tufts. Got these from eBay. Again, you can find these everywhere and anywhere. Just search for grass tufts. You'll find them in lots of different scales. And that was it. 5 minutes work in the last session got me my 12 British late war infantry. So it's basically gone from the very basic plastic sprue all the way through to completed and finished figures in 15-minute bursts. And as I say, you can do this anytime. And if I can do it, and I've shown you how to do it, then you can certainly do it. Please give it a try. Tell me how you got on.